Hi friends, I am Julia and we are talking about evaluate the argument questions today. Evaluate the argument critical reasoning questions are questions on the GMAT verbal section that require you to judge whether a plan is likely to work or whether an argument's logic is sound, whether the conclusion follows from the supporting evidence. These questions are similar to other argument-based critical reasoning problems, but the correct answer choices can work in multiple ways, and that makes them a little bit more complex than just a straight find the assumption question. This variety means that you have to be familiar with the ways to impact a conclusion. So strengthening, weakening, assumptions, that sort of thing. In this video, we are going to examine the top 3 mistakes to avoid if you want to thrive on evaluate the argument question. The first mistake to avoid is choosing an answer that features related information, but that doesn't have any impact on the logic of the argument or the plan. There may be lots of information that is pertinent to the topic an argument discusses that nevertheless doesn't impact the argument's conclusion in a clear way. Remember, we are trying to evaluate the argument, so we have to have an impact in some direction with some sort of answer. So here's a little example. Doctors often determine, without investigating thoroughly, that people experiencing occasional trouble breathing are experiencing asthma, a health issue characterized by airway constriction, and prescribe medication that helps with keeping airways open. However, occasional trouble breathing is not always caused by airway constriction and can be caused instead by a person's being overweight. Therefore, it must be the case that people experiencing occasional trouble breathing often take medication that does nothing to alleviate their symptoms. So, we need to figure out which of the following would be most helpful in assessing the validity of the claim made. Here's our first choice. Whether by simply losing weight, an overweight person can solve occasional breathing problems caused by being overweight. This certainly sounds related to the argument, but our conclusion is it must be the case that people experiencing occasional trouble breathing often take medication that does nothing to alleviate their symptoms. So we aren't even to the point of solving the symptoms. We are strictly talking about misdiagnoses here. This choice highlights information that is pertinent to the discussion, but it does not help us evaluate the argument, because if we answer this question, yes, by simply losing weight, an overweight person can solve occasional breathing problems caused by being overweight, or if we answer this question, no, whether someone who is overweight could simply lose weight and solve occasional breathing problems, the conclusion isn't impacted one way or the other. If we have 2 answers and there's no difference in impact, then it's not helpful for us to evaluate the conclusion. Check this second choice out. Whether using medications commonly used to keep airways open causes the person using such medications to lose weight. At first glance, I don't think that this one sounds that much more entangled with the argument than the first one. But if the answer to this question is a yes, then the argument would be weakened, because taking the useless, quote-unquote, medication would indirectly fix the author's proposed alternative cause. If they're saying that using the medication does nothing, but it fixes their cause, then it actually does solve the problem. It just does it indirectly. The second mistake that students frequently make is getting distracted by an irrelevant comparison. Now, some comparisons are relevant, and they can offer helpful information when trying to evaluate arguments, but they can only be helpful if the comparison is relevant in the context of the argument and in the context of what we are trying to prove or disprove. So here's an example. The serious air pollution problems of San Alonso are, to a large degree, caused by the approximately 400,000 motor vehicles that are used in the city the first day. Fortunately, it is estimated that within 5 years, 200,000 of the motor vehicles used in San Alonso each day will be non-air polluting electric vehicles. Therefore, within 5 years, the amount of air pollution typically seen in San Alonso will be greatly reduced. The answer to which of the following questions would be most helpful, most useful for evaluating the likelihood that the prediction will prove to be correct. So, our prediction is that within 5 years, the amount of air pollution typically seen in San Alonso will be greatly reduced, and it's supported by these numbers of motor vehicles. Let's look at our first choice. Is the level of air pollution in San Alonso greater than the levels of air pollution in most cities? This is a comparison, but is it relevant at all? One clue that it isn't is that we are specifically talking about reducing the amount of air pollution in San Alonso. So we don't even care about any other city. Whether the answer to this question is yes, and the level of air pollution in San Alonso is greater than the levels of air pollution in most cities, or the answer is no, that plan could still come to pass. So is this related? Yes. Is it a comparison that would be helpful to us? No, it is completely irrelevant. Is the number of motor vehicles used in San Alonso each day 5 years from now predicted to be fewer than 600,000? If the answer to this question is no, and the number of motor vehicles used in San Alonso each day 5 years from now is predicted to be at least 600,000 or more, then even if 200,000 of the motor vehicles used in San Alonso will be non-air polluting electric vehicles, that would still leave the same 400,000 or more motor vehicles that are used in the city that are of the air pollution variety. So the conclusion based on these facts is it falls apart. So this is helpful in evaluating this argument. The third mistake that regularly occurs on evaluate questions is choosing answers that just miss the author's point or offer information that would help evaluate a slightly different conclusion than the one we are looking at. So historically, Marvello Chocolate Company sold its limited production high-end chocolate only in specialty stores. But a year ago, Marvello started offering its chocolate in some regular grocery stores, in addition to continuing to offer it in specialty stores. After this change was made, sales of Marvello chocolate decreased rather than increased. Marketing experts theorized that this decrease occurred because Marvello's offering its chocolate in ordinary grocery stores had reduced the appeal of the brand to its traditional customer base. What would help us evaluate this question? To what degree do grocery stores look out for the interests of major chocolate companies over those of smaller, high-end chocolate companies? This seems like maybe it would be helpful, but it actually is not helpful at all. The answer to this question could potentially explain why Marvello hasn't sold much chocolate in the grocery stores. So it could help a conclusion about that. However, we already know that they haven't sold much chocolate in grocery stores. It's right in the argument. We don't need to get any information on why. We already have what we need. We need to evaluate the conclusion that this decrease in sales occurred because Marvello's offering its chocolate in ordinary grocery stores had reduced the appeal of the brand to its traditional customer base. This does not help us with that. Compare that to, are the members of Marvello's traditional customer base aware of what brands of chocolate are offered in grocery stores? The answer to this could be very helpful. If the answer is no, then the whole conclusion falls apart. How would they hold a grudge against Marvello if they didn't even know this stuff was going on? If the answer is yes, then it's ruling out one potential way that the conclusion wouldn't follow from the evidence. So this one is actually helpful for evaluating the conclusion that we are dealing with. So those are our 3 pitfalls. You want to avoid choosing answers that feature related information but don't actually impact the conclusion. You want to avoid choosing answers that impact a conclusion that is similar to the conclusion that you're dealing with. And you want to avoid choosing answers that just bring up irrelevant comparisons, because all 3 of those are not going to actually help us evaluate the strength of the conclusion or plan that we are dealing with. To avoid these pitfalls, you will have to stay anchored in your conclusion. Know it very well, know exactly what it says, know what its limitations are, or if it's a plan, know exactly the goal of the plan, be familiar with its limitations and anything that has already been factored into it. Then you usually use the yes-no test or another relevant test, depending on the answer choices, to check if an answer really helps you to evaluate the argument. If you can't get a clearly different impact on the conclusion or the plan, even with opposite answers such as yes or no, or like 95% versus 5%, then that choice is probably not helpful in evaluating the argument. Until next time, keep studying.